All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and start getting started. Appreciate everyone being here today. It's a loud group, yeah. I wish I had one of those whistles. I can't do it though. Hey, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone coming in today. Kind of missed the tables we had last week. I don't know. I got used to them, but glad everyone could come in today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Smith, and what we've been talking about is stories in the Bible and trying to bring them a little bit to life. Some of these stories we've heard, maybe we were young, maybe we haven't heard these stories before, but I really want to just kind of take a few lessons from these stories. Maybe these are some lessons you hadn't thought about, maybe you had. But really just want to spend some time in the Word with you guys today and see what we come up with. I want to start by asking you a question. It's probably a question you've heard before. If you found a genie in a bottle, and you had 3 wishes, what would your wishes be? And one of the wishes can't be more wishes. Everyone knows that's the rule. Health? Okay.
Not to be rich, but just to be debt-free.
Debt-free. I like that. Wisdom. It's a great one. We've got 3 here. You guys got some room to play with. What are we talking? I ask kids this question when I'm trying to get to know them a little bit, and the things they come up with, it is awesome. I love them. One of my favorites that comes up every now and then is they want the ability to speak to animals. I'm like, yeah, that is a good one. That's one of the ones I've kind of stolen that one as one of my answers. I think that would be a really cool ability. What else? You got 3 wishes. We already came up with that's off the table. Oh. He found the loophole. I'm going to wait till he leaves. Anything else? What else? I mean, you guys can have anything. Questions answered? Do you have like questions that you're like, I just wish I knew the answer to this? Discern truth from a lie? Yeah, so being like a human lie detector. Yeah, that's an awesome one. I love that. Yeah. Just levitate and go. Yeah, that's really cool. Not selfish. I think that's cool.
Not have any more emotional baggage.
That emotional baggage. Being able to just let go of that. Oh man, that would be a well spent wish. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, add to ability to know if what the person's saying to you is right or wrong, because they may be thinking they're telling you the truth, they're just mistaken, and so you thought they're not lying, but they're still wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. Good thought. Yeah. Any material things that you guys want? We're just not going to share those? I know y'all have lists. Y'all have some lists. Today I wanted to talk about a couple of my favorite kind of mic drop moments in the Bible. Okay? Times where things are just like, man, that is a cool moment. And one of those starts with a wish. We're going to start with 1 Kings chapter 3, if you want to turn there. We're going to start with Solomon. So Solomon, we know, has just, taken over. He's now king, and God grants him a wish, basically, right? And Solomon, he made the right call. Let's see, in verse verse 9, he said he asked for his servant, he said, "Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this, your great people?" And in the next verse, we see it pleased the Lord that Solomon asked for this, and he granted him that. And through that, he granted him a lot more than what he asked for. But wisdom is what really Solomon was wanting. And I think that by itself is, he had wisdom already, I would say. The wisdom to ask for that and to know that's what he wanted. I think that's really awesome and important. But God gave him this next level amount of wisdom. This kind that, I am so envious of. And the next story that comes to give the example of the wisdom is one of my, like I said, my favorite mic drop moments. And it's a really intense story. It's not really for the faint of heart. But I'd like to read this with you. So if someone would start in verse 16 and read to verse 22 for me.
Now 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "O my lord, this woman and I dwelt in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then it happened the 3rd day after I had given birth, that this woman also gave birth. And as we were together, no one was with us in the house except the 2 of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she rose in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was dead. But when I had examined him in the morning, indeed he was not my son, whom I had born." Then the other woman said, "No, for the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son." And the first woman said, "No, but the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son." Thus they spoke before the king.
Okay, so here we see 2 women coming, and they both had children, and they're around the same age, but one died. And there was a disagreement on what happened and whose baby was who, right? And one of the things we see is there was no other witnesses in this scenario. It was just them. Her word. And they're coming to Solomon, and they want help figuring this out, because one person's saying, "This is my child," and the other one's, "No, that the living one is my child." No witnesses, 2 women. How are we going to get to the bottom of this? So, verse 23, Solomon, he starts to recap. He says, the one says, "This is my son that is alive, and your son is dead." And the other says, "No, but your son is dead, and my son is the living one." And the king said, "Bring me a sword." Bring me a sword. That's the after he recaps, bring me a weapon. What? This is the wisest person in the world. A weapon. If I was in that situation, I'd be thinking, this king is not sane. Like, this is not somewhere we need to be right now, talking about whose baby this is. And the king said, "Divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one and half to the other." Then the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because her heart yearned for her son, "O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means put him to death." But the other said, He shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide him. Then the king answered and said, Give the living child to the first woman, and by no means put him to death. She is his mother. And all Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. Tell me that's not a mic drop moment. Tell me that is not just wisdom.
And the thing about that wisdom there is there's still some women who would say, I don't want another baby to die, and would want to child topic. So he basically could sense and read to the women. And kind of, he knew that would work in that situation, because it wouldn't necessarily work with any two women.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot deeper that as I was thinking about when we talked about it, it's a lot deeper insight than what we normally would put it.
Absolutely, yeah, that's well said. There's a lot more going on in this story. There is. Many people believe Solomon, being as wise as he was, this divine level of wisdom, Solomon did not need to, he didn't have to ask these questions to get to the truth. When these women came, Solomon most likely knew. He could tell. He had divine level of wisdom. So what was the purpose of this test then? If Solomon most likely knew, maybe by the way they were acting, carrying themselves, or just God intervention level of knowing, why this test? What was the purpose of that?
Well, when the living doesn't want to lose a child, I mean, that's what the fuss is about, right?
Sure.
It's flushing it out.
He's fleshing it out. But if Solomon knew, Solomon's word is word. It is law. Why not when they came, he said, okay, this is clearly, I know already, this is the woman's child. It's her baby. Go on.
I think it's more for the people, the same way that Jesus did miracles. He could have did it in silence or whatever. But I think it's more for the people that are around him to see how wise he is, so they understand what God has put into him. Can't think of anything, but yeah, I think it was more for them to see the wisdom of him.
Yeah, a demonstration showing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Justice.
Yeah.
It makes me think about, slicing things. It makes me think about the whole example of there's a piece of pie and two kids, and they both want, half the pie. So you have one slice of the pie, and the other one gets to choose which half they get, right? It's that same kind of thing. You're flushing it out for fair. But
Yeah.
they're participating in their own judgment.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great point. I do believe that this was to show others God's divine wisdom, and we see that it worked. That all Israel heard of the judgment the king rendered, and they stood in awe of the king. And like you mentioned, Jesus did things similarly, and we see where they said, how does he speak with such authority? There's a level when we see God's divine wisdom coming out that people know, right? It's a different level. Now, like I said, there's a lot more to this story. There's some Jewish customs at play, most likely, and some people believe that there was mental health that was really at play as well with this lady. Because, what kind of woman would basically just give up the charade in the way that she did? It was kind of like a movie where, they're in court grilling somebody and suddenly they just confess. That's kind of how this situation unraveled, where this woman who, it wasn't her son, she was, guilty of this. And at the very end, she's like, yeah, cut him in half. Neither of us will get him. That's right. And, that level of heartlessness and hurt there's a lot to unravel there.
So, at the beginning of the whole thing, both of them were prostitutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they were the one that actually had the child die. Maybe she was looking at him as an income source, right? So neither one of us are going to have an income source when he gets older. The mental
Right.
And, maybe that's where their head was at. I mean, it's just pure speculation.
Yeah, and that's definitely a possibility. There's also customs when it involves widowing and losing a husband, and kind of there's a lot of complicated issues there. I won't go into those today, but it's a fascinating study for you all if you're interested to go at home. You have a thought, Jack?
I think too, probably Solomon saw the enemy involved. Enemy, who set the child. And with envy, there's a lot of anger and resentment that somebody else has something. Like this is quite so much as what you want, this as much as depriving the person of what you don't have. And taking that sword out, made that come to light, so that everybody can see it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's also interesting that these women believed Solomon. Like Solomon had to play this up. He had to really be serious with this. They believed that Solomon was going to cut this baby in half. Otherwise, this charade wouldn't have, unraveled the way it did. I think that's another sign of Solomon's wisdom. But I think it's important that one of the things that Solomon was looking for to show in this scenario was one of these women was acting out of love, and the other wasn't. And when we are looking for where love exists, we can find it. Solomon's scenario, his test that he put in this case, it really dug out which one of these mothers had this intense love to the point where she would let her child go just so he could live. I think that's really important because this other lady, she was acting from a different place than love. Like has been mentioned, it was envy, it was hurt, maybe fear. There's a lot of different things at play. But Solomon was able to flesh out with his words and his scenario where the love was, and to show that God gave him that ability to do that. The point that I really want to draw from this is, although Solomon knew the scenario that was in play, he still crafted and used his words in a way that was really needed. It was needed so that people could see God and see what he was doing in him. And I think that's really important. Like we said in verse 28, the way we speak can show God clearly to others in the fact that Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered and stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. Again, mic drop moment, but the mic drop moment came from Solomon's wisdom with the words that he chose and looking for that love that was involved, finding the motivation.
This reminds me, one thing I'm not good at is holding back my intention, speaking my intention, right? So Solomon doesn't speak his intention to try to figure this out. It reminds me when we were looking for a new preacher, and one of our elders at the time, Glenn Ham, he's passed on, he crafted this question, and it was just absolutely brilliant about how the Bell Shoals Church is going to grow, and then set up that scenario. And then the question was, what do you think about paying commission on baptisms? Right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point of how we may know the point of what we want to do, but there still needs to be some thought put into how we get there and the words we use to get there and the tact that we use. That is very true of Christians as well. Even if we feel like we are in the right or we have the truth, that doesn't give us the right to go about things in ways that are hurtful and blunt and aren't there to help people. Yeah.
This is sort of an afterthought, but the woman whose child did die, she suffered tremendous loss. And sometimes when we lost something, means something to us, our behavior is not what it should be, or could be. And so I think Solomon helped her and helped her. He made the right decision for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. That is such an important piece to remember and to be aware of.
Yeah, a lot of times we look at the mother who lost her child as some crazy evil person, but she just lost her child. She was emotionally messed up.
Yeah.
So I don't think judging her is just, she was broken.
Right.
So she was acting in a way that's probably inconsistent with who would be God's life.
And we don't see Solomon slamming her. We don't see him throwing the book at her. I don't know what happened beyond that. I don't. But we don't see that in this scenario.
I think that the woman that her son really died, again, it was out of more grief that she was doing this lying and everything, because if she was truly an evil woman that wanted, she would have continued the ruse, and he would have had a, well, I knew he would know, but it would be a more difficult thing for the people to see, because if she said, no, don't do, you know, she could have taken also the same thing, seeing what was going on, and going, but I want that baby to be alive too, you know. She could have, and it's amazing to me how God does allow that to happen, because, you know, if she really wanted that baby for herself, she'd still be lying. Even
Yeah.
after him making the decision to do that, you know, she would.
Yeah, she could have called Solomon's bluff and thought, he's not really going to kill him. I can just keep going, and then maybe I'll still win this. Maybe I'll still get this kid.
So I think he sees that it was not as her being an evil woman, but as a grieving woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Rex.
Don't you think this whole story, even being Hebrew Bible, is an act of mercy? Because when does a king even do a judgment? Usually there are so many judges in the country that could have made this decision. They didn't, and these are two prosecutors. I think it's wonderful that these two people that should have been, nobody cared anything about, brought before a king to resolve. That's the sign of the grace and mercy of God.
Wow, that's a great thought. Yeah, someone so lowly that Solomon, he's got a kingdom to run. He's got things to do. There's people who could have handled that. There's probably, they had laws that could have handled that. But for that to be brought to Solomon and presented for us, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, let's transition to my second mic drop moment that I think it plays into this as well. John chapter 8. John chapter 8, and we'll start in verse 1. All right, so here we've got the scribes and Pharisees coming to Jesus with a test. Verse 3, the scribes and Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. And Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." This is another one of my favorite mic drop moments. And I think it really does kind of parallel and tie in with some of the stuff going on with Solomon in that situation. Solomon and Jesus had more wisdom than anyone else in the world. Jesus could see into people's hearts. He could see the intent, and he knew what was going on, right? And this is another scenario that, I mean, I don't know. If I was placed in this situation, if you were placed in this situation, this test seems pretty difficult to get out of. I mean, the blowbacks from whatever Jesus was going to decide, or what I would have decided if I was in that scenario, it would have been bad. And I don't know how it would be possible to get out of that situation. In a movie, with your main characters like back against the wall, things have all turned against them, and you're just waiting. You're like, I know the main character's going to get out of this, but I don't know how. There's got to be some way he's going to get out. That's this scenario where Jesus, if he was cornered, and yet somehow he found a way to completely flip the script. What were the scribes and the Pharisees' motivations at this very time? In this passage, what were their motivations? To condemn Jesus. Yeah. Were they interested, like actually questioning, like, I don't know what to do in this scenario. Let's go talk to Jesus. He'll help us out. No, that's not the case here. It's pretty clear that they did not care about the woman in this situation. They weren't trying to find justice for her. And they didn't care about the law. They know the law. That wasn't their intent. Their intent was to use this woman as a pawn and the law as a weapon in their game against Jesus. That's their motivation. There's no love in this situation. The love is not a motivator. Desire to learn, not a motivator here. And Jesus is so aware of that. He sees that so quickly. Yes?
You can tell it's a setup because she was caught in the act. So that means there was a man that they didn't bring in.
That's right. Yeah. If they were truly caring about the situation, they would have handled it differently. The man would have been there as well. But that's not the case. And what I love about this situation, one, I love that Jesus doesn't answer right away. He didn't have to, and so he didn't. I heard a story once. A preacher said he was teaching a class on this, and he was talking about Jesus writing in the sand, and he asked them, what was Jesus writing in the sand? And of course, he's not expecting answers because we don't know for sure. But one of the students in the class raised his hand. He was so excited. And the preacher called on him, and he's like, oh man, I knew it, and it's going to bug me. It was on the tip of my tongue. And the preacher thought it was so funny because this man thought he's like, I know, I remember. But the truth is we don't. We don't know. We don't know what he's writing. But it's interesting to think about. Yes?
Of course, we don't know what he wrote, and I'm intrigued by it too. But one thought is maybe they would have because he was writing their sins on the ground.
Yeah, that's one of the thoughts that some people think about. He was writing the sins of everyone on the ground, or some people believe writing the 10 Commandments. Some people think he was just doodling, like maybe drawing that like Superman S in the sand. I don't know. But the truth is Jesus, he was doing that on purpose. And it had the desired effect. One, he didn't answer right away. I think that's important for us to know. We don't have to give an answer. We don't have to speak right away. I like to think that, and this is just personal, I like to think he was using it as a way to diffuse the situation and to kind of give space and air in the situation. I don't know if that's the case, but I think it is. I think silence is really important sometimes. But what Jesus does next is he turns what is intended to be a weapon and he turns it into a mirror. He flips it into something that it's not pointed at him, it's not pointed at anyone else, it's only pointed at the people in that audience, at themselves. That is some powerful usage of words. And the way he did it, he didn't say, you all have sinned. Okay, go ahead, throw the stone. I know you've sinned. I know you did. Back there, I know what you did yesterday. He wasn't doing that stuff. He wasn't pointing directly, calling people out. He simply presented a statement that pierced them. But the truth is, that statement, the motivation behind it, there was some mercy there. There was love, and not just love for the woman, but love for those there that he wanted to change their perspective. Because their intents were not in the right place. Jesus knew that. And so it's interesting because one by one they left. And we see the Bible dictated the oldest first. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that the Bible, God put that in there for us to have the oldest leaving the situation first? Lived longer, had some more sin, maybe some more baggage. Yeah, I think that could be part of it. I don't know. I think it's interesting, but I don't have a specific answer for you guys. I just was curious, your thoughts as well, honestly. But when it was all said and done, Jesus was the one person left with the woman. And based off of Jesus' statement, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. Jesus is the one person who can fulfill that. Jesus is the one person who could actually condemn her and throw a stone. Of course, Jesus didn't do that. He had the right to. He didn't. He said, "Where are the people who condemned you?" She said, "No one's here." And he said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more."
Every time I read this or think about this story, to me it's more and more mysterious about what he wrote, right? I mean, just because I'm scribbling on the ground doesn't convict me of anything, you know? I think what he wrote on the ground was the conviction. And I think it's interesting that we don't know what that was, because then we can't back up and say, that guy did this, right? I think that whole mystery of what he wrote in the sand is amazing, because that seems to be what convicted the crowd. And yet we don't know what that is, so we can't then again convict them or try to leverage some sort of, well, if this is okay, then this trumps that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's always this story's always been curious to me in that way, because okay, well, I'll just wait until they all leave. I mean, does that work in humanity? It was a mob of people. Think about a mob of people now. It's like, I think I'll just scribble in the dirt. I mean, what does that do? I mean, really, I don't know. It's always seemed like that is the tipping point of some way. It's cool we don't know.
It is cool. It is interesting to think about why God put in the Bible that Jesus was writing on the ground, but he left out what he wrote on the ground.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that he did it for us. And
It was dates, right?
yeah.
Hey, here's a date where you did something, and they would remember it. Or
Yeah.
maybe it was somebody else's name, and it's like, oh yeah, I kind of messed up that. I mean, who knows? Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me. It's always been curious.
Yeah. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I think Jesus and his ministry, one of his main focuses was trying to get people to see that the law was going to be fulfilled, and after the law was fulfilled, they were going to look at things completely different and serve and worship God completely different. And the Jews would have the opportunity to worship him, but also the Greeks or the Gentiles. And there's several points in his ministry where he kind of shows that this is what you
Amen. Yeah, great points. I love the idea that you brought out where Jesus was really intentional with what he did to stand out and to show people a different way. That's really what I want to get at here, guys, is that Jesus was doing things from a place of love that was different than before. And I don't know that we've been really capturing that now. I don't know if we as Christians, as a body, are really capturing that as well as we should have. I know I haven't always. The point of what I wanted to get at today, and I really wanted to focus your attention on and challenge you, is to be mindful of your intentions. Your intentions as far as what you're trying to do. As we spoke about, you can have the intention, but how you go about it is important. Is your intentions founded in love? If it's not, you better hold back. You better wait. Check your heart and find that love, because that love is what's really going to help you guide the words you choose. Because guys, the words we use when we talk to Christians, when we talk to non-believers, I can't tell you how important those are. And you mentioned Jesus, he reframed. He changed the words and turned them in a way that was digestible, it was intentional, and it was piercing. And I really want to challenge us to be aware of, are we being the examples that Jesus was of having that impact with love, mercy, and truth, the way Jesus did? There's a lot of things that we do, that we get in routines and we think we're in the right, and we don't often check inside and say, wait, why am I doing this? Where is this coming from? I really challenge you guys to be mindful of how Jesus was so different, radical. What kind of person, when a mob comes, would get on the ground and not answer them when they are angry, when they're upset, when they are challenging something? Jesus did things differently. He handled situations differently. And the power we see, it diffused them. It sprung their trap. Jesus does that so often. And we have the ability to do that with our words too. But our words can also get away from us. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I love that thought. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, just based on some of the comments, I really like to think that the Jews, it seemed over time, some generations got it better than others. I think the generation with the promised land really understood what God wanted. So the later generations would fail and would go back and forth. And I also think a lot of Christians today, those those Jews rejected Jesus, they did this, they did that, and then we do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We listed, we missed the whole purpose of the law, and so I think they were the example of what to do and what not to do, and where we're doing wrong, we're usually doing the exact same stuff.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah. Absolutely. So guys, Jesus, he used this as a mirror. Put yourself in this story as well. Let this be a mirror to your life and find those things that you need to be doing better. Because we all have things we got to do better, and we can. So those are my thoughts on this. I hope that you continue looking into this yourself.
Yes. I appreciate this lesson, but you did something that I just never thought. I saw Solomon's wisdom and contrasted it with Jesus' wisdom. But you can see when he got the godly wisdom, he did the same stuff that Jesus did. In fact, when you look at how Nathan handled David, with the story of the sheep, he had the godly wisdom from one hand to the prophet. And it was the same way. They never just went off and said stuff. They ran people around in a circle and got to see their own faults.
Amen. Yeah. There's a lot in this Bible that really got to dive in and find out. Last thought.
Just wanted to say, you
Amen. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that as well. Let's close out with a quick prayer, guys. Heavenly Father, grateful for this day, another day that we get to just soak in your word, discuss things that are important, things that matter, things that can change lives and impact others. Help us to be more mindful of how we address each other, how we love each other and care for each other. Thank you so much for your word. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys.